Hello and welcome to another episode of Can You Talk Real Quick? Production of Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where I do a quick conversation with an expert who knows a lot about a thing that's happening right now that we want to learn about. Dr. Colin Clarke is just that guy. On Sunday, the Soufan Group, where he is a senior research fellow run by my friend Ali Soufan, along with several of his colleagues, dropped a new report on the Wagner Group titled The Evolution of a Private Army. It's fascinating. I skimmed through it. I got Colin on the phone. We had a conversation because that's what I do. Turn it around, put it out for you on a Sunday night. Who's doing it better? Sign up now to standupwithpete.com, patreon.com. You can always feel free to pay a little more, as many of you have. Thank you very much. This is independent media. I'm doing it all on my own in the shed, and today I'm doing it with Dr. Colin Clarke, Director of Research at the Soufan Group. His research focuses on domestic and transnational terrorism, international security, and geopolitics. He has testified before Congress on numerous occasions as an expert witness on a range of terrorism-related issues. He appears frequently on TV. You probably saw him over the weekend on MSNBC and other networks discussing the Wagner Group and their new report. But I'm one of the first people in media to interview him since the report dropped. He's the author of After the Caliphate, the Islamic State, and the Future Terrorist Diaspora, and he was an analyst in Afghanistan for General H.R. McMaster for a few months during the long-lost war there. Very happy to have a PhD in International Security Policy from the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School, Public and International Affairs. How about that? My old job. Colin is on Twitter at Colin P. Clarke. Follow him there, read the report, follow the Soufan Group. Let's do it right now. Can you talk real quick? Colin Clarke. All right, Dr. Colin Clarke joins me now. Thank you very, very much for talking to me. I know you're super busy. You're just on MSNBC, and now you're slumming it with me in the shed. Thank you.
Hardly. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Pete.
You could have, like you could go on cable TV and you wear your sport coat like you do in your collared shirt, and then you come with me, and then you could have just worn like a T-shirt, and it would have been totally appropriate. I know it's Sunday. Thank you for talking to me.
For next time, I'll have my Drazen Petrovic jersey on.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so you guys have just released this huge report, really timely, really important. But just one question I want to ask you, because it's getting a lot of attention this morning. Is there any reason to think that anything about this, and you can tell me what you call it, rebellion, mutiny, coup, had any involvement by the United States government intelligence agencies? It seems that we knew, or at least the White House might have known something was up. That's what the Secretary of State said on a bunch of networks, but won't tell us why. Any reason to think the IC community, the American IC community, was in any way involved?
No, I mean, I think maybe we give ourselves too much credit sometimes. No, not at all. We knew about it, and that, in fact, took the opposite stance, which was to absolutely be completely hands-off, to not even say that we knew about it. Unlike the pre-bunking that we did in the lead up to the invasion of Ukraine, I don't think the U.S. wanted to be associated with it in any way. And frankly, we don't need to be. Let's let the Russians go at themselves organically. The infighting is a huge advantage to Ukraine. And so there's no need. The point now is to figure out what comes next, to kind of strategize, to plan out, various scenarios and be prepared to react.
Yeah, really hard to go. I'll probably wrap up our conversation asking you that, but let's get to your report because it's freaking fascinating. I'm learning so much right now. For example, one of the things I just tweeted in reading your report, I'm tweeting out some excerpts. We've heard Putin say over and over, and Prigozhin, by the way, comments the other day said it was never the reason, as Putin said, to go in and fight the neo-Nazis. We've heard Putin say that. Prigozhin obviously contradicted him in reading your report. And apparently the commanding officer, former Russian military guy of the Wagner Group, is covered in Nazi tattoos.
Yeah, Dmitry Utkin, not a pleasant fellow whatsoever, chose the name Wagner, which was his call sign, because of Hitler's penchant for the music of the composer Wagner. So now these guys are, not every Wagner recruit is a neo-Nazi, but there's a strong ideological tilt, particularly in the leadership. There's ties to something called Task Force Rusich, and potentially even the Russian imperial movement. So, a lot of people want to talk about the far right links of the Azov battalion, which have been minimized significantly since 2014. If you're looking for the neo-Nazis, they're on the Russian side.
Oof. I got a text from a friend who knows things when I told him I was going to talk to you. His question is, what happened to Utkin? I don't know why he's asking that. Has he been missing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Even Prigozhin right now, his whereabouts are unknown. He's supposed to be in Belarus, but there was a kind of fire-breathing Russian commentator that went on TV last night and said both of these guys should be executed. That's the only way to kind of move forward. So they're probably laying low. If they've got a personal security detail, they're likely kind of going to ground to wait out, the next 48, 72 hours and see what happens next. Typically, when you cross someone like Vladimir Putin, you end up eating a polonium salad or falling out of a window. Russia has these really drafty windows that people fall out of frequently. And so, who knows how someone like Prigozhin will be around after the latest stunt.
Put him in the drafty window. No, not that one. The drafty window. Put him over in that room. So
I told my father-in-law has a windows and siding business, and I said there's a big market opportunity in Russia because their windows are crap, apparently.
We've got your father-in-law booked for the show. Actually, we're looking forward to talking with him about that and your relationship with him with such comments. So I want to talk about your report, your expertise. I'm just guessing here because you wrote a whole book about ISIS and what comes next there. Did you first run into the Wagner Group in Syria and Africa when you were doing your research for on ISIS and for that book?
Exactly. Syria and Libya and some of their deployments there. And so these guys have been around for a while. People are saying, oh, where did they come from? This isn't new. I mean, they were initially formed in 2014 in response to the first Russian invasion of Ukraine, not the re-invasion, not the remix, the first invasion these guys formed. And really, they've kind of taken on a global presence and are the tip of the spear of Russian foreign policy. I don't think the Kremlin can operate without these guys. And so I'm very kind of curious about what happens now. Is it kind of take Prigozhin out and install someone, a more pliant commander in charge? Because they need Wagner. And if these guys are rolled in with the Russian military, force posture around the world looks different. Now it's an official Russian military presence in Mali and elsewhere. And that changes the game a little bit.
Tell us more about where this private military contractor. I mean, Americans know of Blackwater. This is not that. I mean, it's private military group. It's not, quote, state sponsored. But my understanding is the reason why Russia likes it and helped create it, obviously, behind it, is because they can be used as a cutout. They can send them in to do terrible things, to invade places, to kill people, to steal. And I'm like, it's not us. That's not the Russian military. Is that ostensibly the relationship?
More or less. It's a direct Russian proxy. They're useful because when they go on these, excursions like going to Syria and Libya, which might not necessarily be popular with Russians back home domestically, the casualty count says, look, we only lost 2 Russian soldiers last year, not mentioning the fact that maybe 100 Wagner guys were killed in action. That doesn't change the fact that Russian families are losing their sons in action, but officially, right, gives them a kind of plausible deniability to say, well, it's not our guys.
Colin, you mentioned in the report, it goes deep into the history and current activity of the Wagner Group, especially in Africa, Mali, Sudan, Mozambique. You mentioned Libya, obviously Syria, and what they're doing. They're terrible. The things they're doing is terrible, and they're making a lot of money extracting things like gold and I think blood diamonds. And what else are they? And your report talks about antiquities even.
Yeah, so they've got their fingers in a lot of different pies. Anything that's not nailed down, they're able to kind of get and sell and profit from. And this is all to help evade sanctions, right? The Kremlin's under significant sanctions right now. That's why I said, earlier, the Kremlin needs these guys. In fact, I'd say they're even addicted to mercenaries. At this point, they're the lifeblood of what's kind of keeping Russia afloat during this, past year and change since they've invaded the Ukraine. And frankly, the Russian military has performed pretty poorly. I don't think Russia deserves to be involved in any conversation about great power competition. They're not a great power. Their military fought, like crap, frankly. And I think, this is just more proof that this is, a former empire that's on the decline. But those can be dangerous too, Pete, right? Because this is a country with, a lot of nuclear weapons, an aging dictator who's overplayed his hand. He's now being challenged from within. So I'm a bit worried about what comes next.
Of course. I mean, is it going to be Putin or a guy who kills his enemies with a sledgehammer? Brezhnev. I mean, this guy is a monster, not to mention, obviously, the most important thing that I feel like, aren't talking enough about are those nuclear weapons that they have more than anybody in the world, is my understanding.
Indeed. Yeah. And then, as you mentioned, Prigozhin, this guy is, he is a monster. I mean, the way that he operates, and he's got nothing to lose. He's playing with house money. He's a former, convict and hot dog vendor. So to rise to this powerful person, this warlord that commands a global empire, and look, the world has been focused on this guy for the last couple of days. He's got, I think, in many ways, not much to lose. At the same time, he wants to hold on to what he has. So I don't see him fading away quickly. I think, he's somebody that's going to, if he's going to go out, it's going to be in a blaze of glory.
The Wagner Group had how many? 25,000 in the battle in Bakhmut. They had, or at least they had a lot of soldiers there. But it's my understanding, according to your report and other analysts, they're organized kind of strangely in that some of them are elite, well-trained commandos who have seen a lot of combat. And then some of them are cannon fodder. They're former prisoners who apparently they let out. And not only they give them their freedom to maybe die, they also give them the drugs that they need for different kinds of things like AIDS and hepatitis and other things that they're not getting in jail. And what I keep reading, Colin, is that they're being sent in, quote, waves and just being killed. But I mean, what does that mean? Does it mean what it sounds like it means?
Yeah, it's truly dystopian. I mean, these guys are considered expendable. And I think that's what a lot of what Prigozhin railed against was. They weren't getting the ammunition. They were told, if you don't have a weapon, pick up one from a dead person in front of you. And frankly, a lot of them, the casualty count was so high because these guys weren't being prioritized on the battlefield. So after getting injured, a lot of them would bleed out and die, when if Russia had modern kind of military medicine and prioritized these individuals, they may have lived. I mean, they'd be maimed and wounded, but they'd live. It just gives you a sense of the way that these guys fight and the way the Russians consider them. They don't even retrieve their own dead from the battlefield. They leave them there like dogs. And that tells you, I think, everything you need to know about, how Russia views these people. Cannon fodder is the appropriate word. I mean, they're just completely expendable. And they're, the bodies are piling up.
The Wagner Group has aircraft or anti-aircraft or both?
Yeah, both. And look, this is where a lot of the friction comes from, because in many ways, particularly outside of Ukraine, but also inside Ukraine, Wagner depends on the Russian Ministry of Defense, right? For logistics, for lift, for all these other kind of heavy weaponry, and so without Shoigu, Prigozhin can't necessarily exist on his own. But at some point, the kind of power dynamics seem to have flipped, where Prigozhin's calling the shots. He's got leverage. He's denigrating these senior Russian military officers like Prigozhin, like Valery Gerasimov and others, always kind of careful not to go as far as criticizing Putin. But even that seems to have changed over the last 48 hours. And now we see this kind of grand bargain struck by the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, to kind of salvage us, help the Russians save face. But I think Putin comes out of this looking incredibly weak.
I still don't understand how read in on this one issue you are. I know you've been working to put out this very important report, and I'm not sure how up on current events you are, but I think probably, well, certainly more than I do. Prigozhin feelings on the war in Ukraine. For it, against it, for it, but mad that these generals that he's been critical of didn't send him what he needed. Also read that he had what he needed, but he lied about it, and so that he could do what he did yesterday and have all the ammunition and people that he needed. So I still don't understand his public criticisms of these, the chief of staff and the Ministry of Defense guy. I forget their names. You just got them both.
And Gerasimov, yeah. So I think a lot of it, too, is they were trying to claim credit for the ground that Wagner was able to take, the limited Russian military. He felt like he was being outshined in many ways. But I've also, and I wrote about this in Foreign Affairs with a couple of colleagues last month, my take was that he was, causing so much trouble and releasing these kind of videotaped diatribes because he wanted to be redeployed. I don't think fighting in Ukraine in a conventional military conflict is Wagner's comparative advantage. They're much more positioned for expeditionary operations in fragile states, protecting military juntas and dictators. That's where, they're golden. And so I think he wanted to get back to business. The fact that he was forced to recruit from jails tells you it was almost changing the culture and dynamics of what Wagner had become.
Oh, that was a new thing because they needed more guys. That wasn't something Wagner and Prigozhin had always done.
Exactly. And now they're kind of, okay, well, we need bodies. So where are we going to get them? Sure, let's get these guys, let's go into the Russian prisons where, as you mentioned, it's actually about a third of male prisoners are thought to have HIV or hepatitis. And let's tell them if they fight and they live, they can have some medicine. So again, I mean, dystopian is truly the word. If you made this in a horror movie, I'd say, it seems a bit far-fetched. No country could be that cruel. But here we are. This is Russia in 2023. I think it tells you a lot about, not only the way that Russia operates, but it tells you a lot about the people who are so eager to support the Russian narrative, including in the West, and denigrate the Ukrainians.
Yeah, that's certainly something I'd love to talk with you more about off or online. They're more used to, maybe you wanted to be redeployed, working in these fragile states. One line that caught me that I shared on Twitter from your new report about when they operate in those types of places. Wagner poses a catch-22 in some respects. Forces are invited to stabilize fragile states, but its actions actively invite further instability, creating more opportunities and a greater demand signal for its services. I'm going to read that one more time and edit it because I screwed it all up. But you write, Wagner poses a catch-22 in some respects. Its forces are invited to stabilize fragile states, but its actions actively invite further instability, creating more opportunities and greater demand signal for its fuck shit up so they can get a contract to fix it.
Exactly, man. It's what the U.S. military would call a self-licking ice cream cone in many ways, right? So, or a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see these actions making further, destabilizing the country further. And they're like, look, your country's fucked up. You need us. And it's like, but part of the reason our country's fucked up is because you came here and started killing civilians wantonly. So, right. And they're saying, right, but you need us now. And they do fight against jihadist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But at the same time, they kill civilians in the process. They create further grievances that can then be used by the population. They push civilians into the arms of some of these groups. And what they get out of it is resources. So they don't care at the end of the day whether a country like the Central African Republic is stable. In fact, it behooves them that it's not stable, because if it was stable, they wouldn't be needed.
I think that's a bad company morally. I think that people shouldn't do that. I
actually wrote an article called Bad Company a couple of weeks ago about Wagner.
Really?
It was a nod to my classic rock, love of classic rock, but I thought it was apropos.
Oh, that's awesome. That's hilarious. I got to get it. Well, finally, then, let me just ask you, this is your analysis. It's speculation. Everybody's trying to weigh in. You know more than most folks on this, certainly that I talk to. What, to me, the most important imminent issue is, what does this mean for the current conflict in Ukraine if Wagner, wherever they're deployed, are now being questioned, having their loyalty questioned?
Yeah, I mean, it's dark days ahead. I think in Russia, there's going to be a lot of folks that are purged and sent to some pretty, dark places, some prisons and worse. Again, I think there's opportunities here for the U.S., the Ukrainians, and other allies to exploit this. I often don't engage in schadenfreude and taking joy in other people's misery. But this is a case where, this is a long time coming. We've often talked about Putin as 10 feet tall. He's this grand strategist that's playing 7-dimensional chess. And I say bullshit. He throws a lot of stuff against the wall, see what sticks, and does more of it. This shows you exactly how myopic he's been.
Yeah, I don't know much, but I know that before he invaded Ukraine, Vladimir Putin was in a pretty good spot internationally. I mean,
no doubt.
It wasn't fading after he invaded Ukraine. And look at him now. I mean, different people can come to different conclusions, but the idea that he is in any way stronger or that Russia is in any way better than a year and a half ago, I don't think anybody's come to that conclusion across the whole spectrum of ideology.
Maybe some tankies on Twitter and RFK Jr., but outside of those folks, I doubt there's anyone that's really cheerleading for the Russians right now. Joining
me now, RFK Jr. Colin, what did you want to say? I'm sorry, he's here.
I would just like to, hold on, I'd like to show him what the vaccine did to my ability to hold.
Well, what I see is metal sticking to your face. That's what I see, Colin, for my listeners. Wow, this RFK is right. Dr. Colin Clarke, what a pleasure to have you. I learned a lot from this report, following you on Twitter, seeing you all over on TV. Thank you very much for spending some time with me.
Thanks, Pete. I hope to do it again.
All right, there he goes, Dr. Colin Clarke. Go tweet him and let him know that you heard him here on the show. Go follow the Soufan Center on Twitter. Say hi to my friend Ali Soufan. He, of course, on Twitter at Colin P. Clarke. And more information on Colin and all of my guests, you can go to the show notes or go to the website, standupwithpete.com, and get to them through that. This has been another episode of Can You Talk Real Quick? Dropping in on a Sunday afternoon, getting it done, turning around under an hour. Nobody does it better than Stand Up with Pete Dominic, which is basically just me in a shed. So sign up right now for a subscription, give a rating, a review, or whatever you want to do to help out the show. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.